Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'm Brent Hoberman, co-founder and chairman of Founders Forum. For those of you who may not know us, Founders Forum is a global community of the top tech founders, corporate CEOs, and senior investors. While our community is not able to gather together in person, we are thrilled to bring you all together on this event series, FF Live. FF Live is obviously bringing some of the world's best entrepreneurs together virtually and taking lots of questions from our community. And there's a especially great group of you here today. So I'm keen that we go to you very soon during this conversation. A little bit of housekeeping. This session is being live streamed to our Founders Forum LinkedIn page. So welcome to everyone joining us from there. Please do pose your questions to the panelists via the comments section on LinkedIn as well. The FF team are keeping an eye on these and sending them over to me. A recording of the session will also be posted along with other FF Live sessions on the Founders Forum YouTube page once this is over, so please go over there and subscribe. Q&A. For those of you on Zoom, please submit your questions via the chat box and be sure to send to everyone. Our team is moderating these behind the scenes. If you're here with us on Zoom, you will be invited to ask your question directly and will be unmuted when called upon. Please switch on your video when you ask your question and introduce yourself so we know who you are. So I'm delighted to have Riccardo, Zacconi and Ilkka here. They are two of Europe's best founders. I think that's not an overstatement. That's not American hype. That's European understatement, actually, in fact. And you know, we've had them. The last time they were together, actually talking, was at Founders Forum Rome, which Riccardo helped us a lot with setting up that version of Founders Forum. And we've also done a lot with Ilkka at Slush, the event that he is one of the founders of in Helsinki itself. So we today we've tried to say that we'll make this a slightly more current. So we're not really going to go that much into the founder stories. I think many of you will be familiar with, and if you're not, you should be, with the stories of King and Supercell. But we really want to learn from them about how they're thinking about the world today, and also maybe what those of you listening can learn from the pivots that gaming companies go through, in that these are some of the most flexible, agile companies that are used to dealing with failure, used to dealing with sort of challenges. And by that, obviously, we're thinking of COVID, meaning a lot of you are thinking about changing your businesses. We'll also go on to sort of Europe, what's European tech look like, European investments, and I think to have the two of these without tackling culture would be remiss. So why don't I start with that point about pivots, and how do you see, how have you created, pivoted yourselves in your career? I think both of you started with your businesses essentially with failures, I think it's fair to say, and then had rapid successes afterwards. So you've had to pivot from that. And what do you think others can learn from your examples? Why don't we go to, should we go to Riccardo first and then Ilkka?
Sure. So first of all, I would like to say hi to all the friends who are actually online. I've seen a few like Lulu and Massimo, with whom we did the Founders Forum Rome. So I think that the King started actually during tough times, because we launched the company, we founded the company in 2003, and 2003 was a very toxic year to raise money. So we started from day one with a mindset that we need to become profitable as soon as possible. And we became profitable in a year and a half, and we've been profitable since then. And we've always kept the mentality of being profitable, which I think is very important. And I think, and then we had subsequently when Facebook grew and we were not on Facebook, and basically we were almost out of business. It took us 2.5 years to reinvent ourselves. And then we became much, much stronger after that. So I think that often moments of where there are big problems can be actually huge opportunities. So if I think of the current moment, for example, with COVID, people are staying at home. And for most, or for many digital companies, this is a massive opportunity because the level of attention of users is actually much higher. For example, in games, they're doing extremely well. But also marketing is much, much cheaper. Usually marketing is cheaper in the first quarter of the year because all the FMCG companies are not buying so much. Well, now in this time, actually FMCG companies and other companies which usually spend a lot of money on marketing are not spending so much. So there's a big opportunity there again. And if you're in a model which is not doing well, then it's an opportunity to reinvent yourself. For example, going from offline to digital and building a digital relationship. Ilkka, over to you.
Thanks. First of all, thank you on my behalf as well. It's fantastic to be here, and also a great many friends seem to be online. So and always really fun to do this type of stuff with both Riccardo and Brent. So thanks for having me as well. Well, first of all, I think Riccardo said something extremely valuable. You know, in a kind of COVID type of situations, and with almost like any troubles, I do believe it's important to have that mindset. But think of every kind of challenge and every problem as an opportunity. Like, and that's really like if you're an entrepreneur, that's the only way to kind of succeed or even have a chance to succeed. I mean, if you kind of paralyze and start to like just think about all the troubles you have, that will obviously lead nowhere. So I think that advice that Riccardo just gave is a kind of golden, I think, for all of us. And then when it comes to like successes and failures, so Brent say that both of us failed like many times early on. I would almost like, and that is absolutely true, but I would almost also add that I have personally been failing like ever since. I mean, yes, I've had successes, but if I think about last year, I made a huge amount of mistakes even during that 1 year. And for me, like how I think about sort of quote mistakes or quote failures is that it just tells me that if I'm failing like most of the time, it just tells me that I'm trying to do a very hard thing, and I'm really trying to push the boundaries. And if I'm trying to do that, then of course I'm gonna be failing. But every once in a while, I can also be then successful. And I think like without like lots of failures, you can't be successful. That's how I personally kind of view them, and I don't even think about them as failures. I try to view them as kind of opportunities for learning. And then maybe last thing I would like to say about the kind of pivot moments is that I think it all kind of starts from having a kind of culture, and having a culture of like honesty, and I would almost say brutal honesty. And I'm not a big believer in these like heroic moves that kind of leaders do, that okay, the leader like sometimes somehow like has a vision and sets a new direction, and then the others follow. I'm much bigger believer in involving everybody, and like just being super honest, what the situation is. Like from Supercell's point of view, for example, like we were failing almost for the first 2 years because we were trying to build games, also for the Facebook platform, and the games weren't great, and Facebook wasn't an ideal platform for those games. But we were trying to be like really honest with everybody about the results, and super transparent, and everybody had to look truth into the eye. And then when people do that, and if they have the right type of people, like proactive people and kind of entrepreneurial minded people, then actually change is much easier to kind of, or it's way easier to make the change happen. And it's not so much driven by the leader, it's driven by everybody. And that's certainly how I kind of felt that how all the pivots like in Supercell's history have happened. So driven by the people themselves.
Now, it's interesting, but before this call, apologies, Brent, if I take away your job, but before this call, Brent asked us if we are friends or foes. Now, of course, we're very competitive and we like to compete against each other, but we are friends in a sense beyond the fact that we've seen each other a few times, of course. But I think that I couldn't say that I'm more aligned with anyone else than actually Ilkka in the way of thinking, and the way of thinking of how to build a culture which is strong for a company. He wrote, for example, now the congrats for the 10 years of Supercell. He wrote now a post about the 10 things to observe, which I would recommend to anyone to read. But this reflects entirely also the experience we went through in King. And I think what you just said with brutal honesty is one of the fundamentals of how to go through really tough times. And if I can make an example here of what we went through, it took us 2.5 years to crack Facebook. We were on the web. And you can handle this in two ways. Either you say, don't worry, everything is fine, we'll get through it. And or you can actually take it with honesty. But this is what we did. basically I showed a picture of a caricature called Mordillo that basically was sipping a cocktail on the beach. And then if you zoomed out, this was basically the beach was an hourglass with the sand going down. And that's what in the way how I presented this honest picture to say, look, we're still doing fine because we have lots of users still, but the usage is going down. It's only a matter of time that we will be gone. And that's required brutal honesty to really take decisions that you would in normal times not take. So the decision we took at the time was to divide the company in two parts. We had 110 people at the time, and to focus 50% of the company on completely new things, which was basically how do we crack Facebook, and put the other 50% of the company on maintenance with zero innovation anymore, just to maintain and make sure that we can generate enough revenues to keep the entire company going. So, I completely subscribe what you just said, Ilkka.
Great. Just, I mean, taking that a bit more, where do you both learn from? So, I mean, in particular, you know, thinking of the culture and the culture of learning from failure, and what else, you know, do you see yourselves as pioneers in that, or were there other people that you could learn from and adapt and take things from?
Well, I personally learned from people like, well, actually I learned from people like both of you guys, and I try to talk to as many people, like entrepreneurs and other people in our space, and also elsewhere in completely other industries, to learn from them. And I particularly, I'm a huge sports fan, and ice hockey, of course, being a Finn is my sport. But I for example, I regularly talk to like ice hockey coaches because I feel that I can learn so much from them, how they can put together the team and how do they think about culture and chemistries, and I read a lot as well. But you know, but I do think that, you know, like by just talking to like people around you, and you know, and you would find it surprising. Like, I mean, Riccardo, I think said it well. We, for example, even if we are like in a kind of traditional sense, one might think that we are kind of competitors, but we are actually like good friends, and you know, we do talk to each other like quite a lot, and we're gonna build this relationship, and I do think that, you know, sometimes people miss opportunities to build these like great relationships even with their competitors, because I mean, if you learn I mean, there's always an opportunity to learn something new from a person like Riccardo when you can talk to like somebody who has like his kind of breadth of experience, and you would be surprised like how willing people are to share those learnings, at least in the game space. But I believe that to be true, like in entrepreneur, like even in entrepreneurship in general.
I think also that is what you said earlier. I think that learning and making mistakes goes actually really hand in hand, because ultimately it doesn't matter how much you learn, you still have to build your own opinion on the direction you want to go. And at the end, you know, you need to take some risks. And I think that the worst is not to take a decision. And when you take a decision, the risk that you might be wrong is there. I know, and as Ilkka said, he made many mistakes. I made many mistakes. But I think it's important to set a culture where if you make a mistake, you actually acknowledge that you make a mistake, because it means anyone else can make a mistake.
I can't remember whether either of you followed when I was lucky enough to interview Eric Schmidt and his team about the book he wrote, The $1 Trillion Coach, on Bill Campbell, the guy who coached many of Silicon Valley's greats. What do you guys think about the actual, I mean, Ilkka, you mentioned the sporting, you know, learning from sports, and actually Bill Campbell was a sports coach first. And so that idea of learning a lot from sports, that certainly comes from him as well. But do you recommend others on your teams have coaches? Did you guys have coaches? Should we get Ilkka first and then Riccardo?
Yeah, well, it's a great book, by the way. I read the book as well, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, like if you want to call them coaches or not, but I do think it's important, at least for me personally, it's been super important to have like somebody to talk to, like somebody, like especially when you're having a kind of bad day or you're having challenges. I mean, if you just pick up the phone and call somebody to get second opinion and you know, get kind of a shoulder to lean on, I do think that's important. And you know, just somebody, like I think the best coaches are the type of people who, like, instead of like telling you what to do, they just ask the right questions. and by just talking to somebody like that, like even if that somebody isn't exactly telling you what to do, but why you're asking the right questions, like somehow kind of you kind of start to understand yourself, like maybe what might be the right path forward, or at least what could be a potential path forward. So I actually do believe in the value of coaches. Of course, like it's very like individual. Like, I mean, like certain type of coach might work for me, but then works for no one else. And we've at Supercell, for example, we've started to use coaches, and not just for the, well, we have a very small leadership team, if you could call that, but for us, like it's been important to enable the coaches for everybody, like for every, a bit more than 300 people that we have, and like, and we have a lot of this pool of coaches that people can choose from, and we've noticed that actually the pool needs to be pretty large, because it's, the most important thing about the relationship between an individual and the coach is that there's kind of trust, and it's a lot about chemistry, and the coach actually has to be somebody that you actually enjoy talking to, and you trust completely. And of course, it takes time to build that trust, and as I said, it comes down to be having a great personal relationship. But yes, like in short, I absolutely believe in the value of coaching, but it doesn't have to be kind of formal professional coach. Like one of my best coaches, for example, was our very first chairman, Petteri Koponen, whom I talk to often, and he's definitely not a trained coach, but was a great coach, like for me. And over the years, I've had I've been very fortunate to work with like so many great people, and even at Supercell today, there's people who work at Supercell who I would consider my coaches, in a way that if I oftentimes go for them for advice, and I feel that I learn from these people every day.
I usually learn too late. Often the advice I get, I only understand it long time later. So I try to speak to many people as you do, but often I understand only later. But I think my best coach were my parents, in terms of never giving up, and also in terms of sports, which is for me something that I always use to de-stress. It's the best way to de-stress is for me is to do some sports and go out. But I think that one of the things which I learned from, I think some of the coaches which I rate it highest, are that there's nothing that is better than muscle memory. So I think you can read a lot, but actually unless you really understand in the back of your mind, and it's really innate, and often muscle memory is built with experience. You go through it, shit happens. It didn't go well, but you learn from it. And then the next time you actually have one piece of more ingredient that helps you in a decision, or in how to handle a specific situation. And that's where I think making mistakes actually is really, really important, because it's often from these mistakes that you learn a lot, often more than from a coach. So in any case, I think we use coaches, just to continue on the topic. I think we use coaches regularly, of course. And I think the more a company moves away from being a pure startup to becoming more mature, coaches are really important to continue, because people don't only stay with you because of the initial idea or because they like the people, but also because they learn continuously. So I think it's really important to ensure that everyone continues on this journey of learning. And sometimes the journey of learning, the answer to the journey of learning is not just to get a coach, but is maybe to change the job and have rotation. So for example, Alex Dale, who was our chief marketing officer, after a while he didn't learn anymore, so he said, I want to do something else. So he continued, and he became the head of a studio and completely different job, and he was amazing there. So as an example.
Great. Sorry, I've switched device, and I think all is working now. So I was also going to ask about hiring in this the strange world that we're in now. I'm sure I have views on it, but whether you can hire people you're not going to be able to meet because of current lockdown.
Well, of course, it's a bit more challenging, but we've I think we are getting more accustomed to using like services like Zoom, and we've always used them for interviews anyway, like for the first round of interviews before we fly people to say Helsinki to meet us in person. And yes, we've had people start during the COVID situation that people who we haven't actually met in person. So of course, it takes some it takes some time to get used to that type of thing, and and it's interesting, we have teams and somebody joins that team, and they just haven't met in person, and it's just one more person in the Zoom meeting. But I think like people can get used to anything, and I know of companies, software companies even, that are based completely on this idea of like remote working, these kind of virtual companies. So I think in many ways I believe that at least part of that must be kind of also the future of work and future of entrepreneurship at large. And I think also like we at Supercell, even if we never founded the company and that idea, I mean, you have to be open-minded, and as Riccardo just said, I mean, the most important thing I guess in life is just to keep on learning, and if you don't try out new things, you won't learn anything. So we've tried to be very open-minded, and yes, we are hiring even under these like special circumstances.
And how are you both thinking about offices? Riccardo, you do still, I know, have Sweet Capital and other things, but we've surveyed a lot of our founders, and we're in the process of still surveying more. So maybe we can put that through on the chat, the survey, but about attitudes to coming back to offices now. And I think we've been a little surprised, and we're not sure that we've got that all the drivers are right, but currently most of the entrepreneurs are saying they don't want to go back to offices. And I don't know how you guys see that and view that.
I have always been in favor basically of working from home. I think that if you give responsibility, you manage by results. You don't manage by how many hours someone is in the office. And I think that sometimes it's more challenging. Of course, if you have kids at home, it's not as easy. But it's actually really, really nice. For me, I can think much better. I'm much more efficient if I'm in an environment where I'm relaxed rather than I have to do many hours. King, for example, now basically moved from an office environment now to everyone working remotely, and it's working really well, I think. I think that probably the answer is somewhere in the middle. I don't think that you can replace the office. You still need a place where people can meet physically. But I think that this experience shows that you can do much more also working from home, and you can be much more flexible, and often come also with better results because it gives you time to think.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Riccardo said. Like our experience has been that, some teams, have been able to actually get more done like by working remotely, and then some teams have managed to get less or have done less, and it hasn't worked out that well. And it really seems to be, it depends on the team. It depends on like the individuals on the team, what's their situation in life. As Riccardo said, if you have like say small kids at home, you are trying to run a home school for them while working. Of course, that's challenging, and then the productivity goes down. But there are situations there where remote work can work beautifully, and I think, and I also I still absolutely believe in the value of having a physical office. I mean, it does serve a purpose, but I think that going forward, many companies, including ourselves, will be way more open-minded about remote work as a large, and I think it definitely can like be at least sort of a part of the ways that people work.
Any tips on, because one of the challenges therefore is, we've sort of both all mentioned it, but productivity, and how do we, any tips on how you can measure productivity, any tools, or maybe do we still need new startups to help us measure productivity?
Well, at least on our part, like we just trust our people and the teams. We are quite light on measurements, and I don't know, like from I mean, we are trying to like build new things, new entertainment, something that makes people laugh, and something that they smile at, and that makes their life happier. So I don't know like how exactly would you measure like how I mean, of course you can look at the game metrics, of course, and all the companies in our field, like they collect a lot of data, and they analyze that and all that, but I don't know like how would I go about like measuring the kind of the productivity of a team, or if it even would make sense in our business. I guess the proof is in the pudding. Like, is the game great? Do people play that for a very long time? Do they enjoy that game? That's how we, I guess, then would ultimately measure the success. And as I said, we are very light on any kind of processes and management techniques anyway. We just trust our teams and the people in those teams.
I think it also depends heavily on the business. I think if you were in manufacturing, probably productivity would be really important. And there are many ways to basically to measure it. But I think in our business, it's more basically timeline to complete projects. And when there is a deadline, basically what present. So is the result good? Is it creative? Is it innovative? Does it perform well? And so on. So I think that it's not only meeting the target on time, but it's also about what is the result of what you have produced. So yeah, we do measure productivity, but not in a way as you would measure it in manufacturing. But basically, is the game a great game?
And talking about much bigger organizations, so we all speak to large corporates and governments. Do you think there is a lot they can learn and apply from your worlds? Or I know you've both sort of said, and I know Ilkka in your most recent thing, you said, look, here's our culture, but don't try and copy it. Just try and think, I think to summarize badly, try and think more about your own culture and what you can apply. But we all seem to get frustrated with the slowness of large corporates and also of governments. And do you think they can learn, or is it just too hard?
I think many opportunities have been missed. I'm talking now about more institutional companies, especially retailers. They could have used this opportunity of making available their brands, of closing partnerships short-term and servicing users wherever they are. Instead, users went from where they usually shop to online retailers. So they lost their instead of using the opportunity to build a business now in a different way, a more future, many have lost market share. And I think if I think of the government, I think there are many examples of what the government is doing actually really right now in terms of, for example, informing every person in the UK every day with a message saying these are the latest on COVID and what the government wants to do with regular updates using TV, so multimedia. Of course, there can be much more that can be done, and I think digital presents the opportunity to build a close relationship one-on-one with every person. And I think that's where I think we have seen a few things, but much more can be done. And another example is, for example, remote health. I'm experimenting like crazy. I bought all kinds of devices which are all connected with your mobile device. And it's actually fascinating. So there's so much that can be done.
Yeah,
Ilkka?
Yeah, definitely agree with all of that. And well, I guess like in my limited experience, like in working with sort of governments and like those type of organizations, like I guess I've learned that they are just completely different animals, and how the whole political system works compared to say startups or companies in general. So I actually don't feel that I'm that I'm in a very good position to kind of give advice to them and what should they do better. I appreciate that what they're trying to do is extremely hard in the first place, and it involves a lot of complexities and a lot of people, and then of course like the situations like COVID probably don't make it any easier. I think the one thing that has been interesting though, at least here in Finland, is that like for example like COVID, like it basically like forced like everything to go to digital that like what possibly can go to digital. Like for example, like I think like for years and years, like there has been discussion in Finland, which supposedly has one of the best public schooling system in the world, if not the best. We've had this discussion about like how can we make the leap to digital and all that, and just discussion about it. And then the COVID happened, and essentially in a week, all education was digital, just like that, because it had to be. And it was amazing to see kind of the creativity that the individual teachers and the schools like had on this, and how they organized like all kinds of like really fantastic kind of virtual classes, for the kids and using the latest technology because they had no other option. And like, and it's kind of a cliche, but like I fundamentally believe that kind of constraints increase innovation. And I think that was just like a fantastic example of that. You know, the constraint of COVID like forced like you know, the whole education system like in this country to kind of transform itself to digital in a week, which is exactly what they did, and I think it worked really, really well. So and again, one of these like examples, but I think Riccardo cited a bit earlier on in this conversation, that you know, in every problem or in every challenge there also is a massive opportunity, and this is just a yet another proof about that.
I mean,
actually,
so
can I just build on what Ilkka
Yep.
just said? I'm just
Sure.
thinking loud for the second, but it's actually really exciting if you think. Imagine if we did the following, if governments would do the following now. This is the biggest experiment ever done in digital in the world. Every country in the world is experimenting now from the scratch, more or less, with different models covering more or less every aspect of life. Yeah, it goes from learning, it goes to social care, how to talk to people, how to get their feedback, etc. Every aspect of life. Now, if governments were really smart, they would engage someone, consultants, to analyze all of these experiments around the world and see what went well, what went wrong, what can we do different. And already from there, this would be so valuable, this COVID time, that we would get a return on this massive issue many times in the future.
Great, no, good points. Taking the education point sort of broadly, or back to, so one of the things about online education that's surprising is actually there are very few European winners in it. Most of the technologies that our children will be using will be American right now. So, which is sort of a surprise considering Europe has many of the world's best educational brands, but they haven't, in typical fashion, adapted very fast online. With that framework, so how are we thinking? You're both pretty active investors in European tech, and where do you see that Europe needs to get better? I mean, you represent both of you two of the very few major global successes, companies that are recognized globally out of Europe. We all know that we'd love there to be more. What else? What do you guys see and think about that?
I believe in the product. It all depends on the product, and to get it right is difficult, but also is not difficult. Meaning you have a lot. You have to think a lot, like in very simple terms, and something that you would use yourself. For example, just to give a very concrete example, I'm now using this time to learn something that for me was almost impossible, really complicated, and I would have never thought actually I could somehow learn, and still have to prove it, of course, by the way, but I'm having fun doing it. And there are lots of the game mechanics that we create in our games like Andy that are integrated in this software, and it's a software is called Simply Piano. I'm not sure who else tried it, but it's really fun. And it's learning something that's as complex as learning to play piano. So I think that my advice is, I think there are always opportunities, even in something that currently is not doing well, like education is more difficult, to make something more fun. And I see Lulu here, Lucrezia here also on the panel, and she's developing games for kids to basically teach kids to learn. And so I think you can make it fun, but try to think something that is really not necessarily what is available today. Think new, and focus on the product. If the product is good, marketing is easy. Sorry, Ilkka, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, and Brent was, I mean, I agree with Brent that of course all of us like in European tech would love to see like you know, more successes coming from here, but of course, you know, well, everybody knows that, but I think it's gonna get better, and it's already getting much better. And maybe the two thoughts I would offer on that, why that is and why I believe that, is that the first one is that I think traditionally, like you know, I also talk regularly to many kind of venture capitalists, like mostly in the US, but also here in Europe. And then I always ask them the same question, that, you know, what do you think is the difference between a typical like American entrepreneur and a European entrepreneur? Well, usually the answer what comes back is that, you know, it's always the same. It's kind of the level of ambition in Europe, like traditionally, has been lower than in the US, or than for the founders in the US. But I actually think that's changing. So like, if there's been like now so many like success cases recently from Europe, like of course King, like represented by Riccardo, but look at like somebody like Daniel Ek and Spotify, and there are many others, and there's going to be way more new successes like that in the coming years. I feel confident about it. So I think, and you know, success creates success, and you know, then you're gonna, and then I do believe that all of us will always be inspired by the next big success, and then the bar, like, you know, hopefully like goes higher and higher for everybody who kind of starts, and that's I just fundamentally believe that by us just raising the bar and getting more ambitious and having bigger dreams as entrepreneurs, as companies, you know, that will in itself will be, you know, that will help us like catch up with our American friends here. And then the second thing that I is very much related to what Riccardo said. I also believe it's all about the product. I mean, it really is. I mean, and we are living in this global digital world. You know, a user, say in the US, for example, I don't think she cares like where was that product created. I mean, all she cares about that the product or service is great, and you get some good service and a great experience. But she couldn't care less like where is it originally coming from. And then of course, you know, that's a massive opportunity for Europe. I mean, we have an amazing amount of talent here, and very kind of diverse set of talent creating these products. And you know, the great news is that, you know, these great products and great companies can come from anywhere these days. And you know, like you know, I think like Supercell is one of those living proofs of that. You know, they're coming from a bit of a distant country, Finland, but you know, that hasn't stopped us like being popular like all over the globe. And you know, Spotify has the same thing, done the same thing from Sweden, and there are others. And as I said, there's going to be way more others in the coming years. So I'm, you know, as a person, I'm just very bullish on the opportunity for the European tech companies.
Can I elaborate
yeah, sure,
on
go for
what
it. Yep.
Ilkka just said? So I think that it's actually interesting to see, if you look at in which countries have some of the most the world originated, and actually some of this in Europe, most actually companies have originated in very small countries like Finland or Sweden. King actually started, in fact, in Sweden, because all my co-founders were in Sweden. And the reason is very simple. The reason is that you're forced to be ambitious because Finland or Sweden are too small of a market to develop a product just for Finland or for Sweden. This means from day one, you need to think international. From day one, you need to think of a product that not just in Finland or in Sweden, but on a global stage. While this is the damnation of countries that are stuck in the middle, like for example, Italy or Germany or France, they are big enough to actually start and create a startup that can be profitable in these countries. But you will never be able to create a startup that is going to be a multi-billion-dollar company. It's more difficult, let's put it this way, on a global stage. And because the product, when you start a company purely with a local focus, you don't look if the product is new on a global stage. And that's something which, where I think how I define ambition. Ambition is to create something that is new, not just where you are, but actually on global markets. And that's where I think a way to create this ambition with startups is, I think some of the most successful founders come as spin-offs of companies which have been successful globally. And this because once you lick success, it's very difficult to forget it. Yeah? Like eating a good pasta al dente, afterwards go back to the pasta which is not cooked.
Yeah, do you think we will see a lot of actually a Supercell mafia and a King mafia, like we have a PayPal mafia or a Skype mafia? Are they coming, or do not enough people leave your companies?
Oh, many people have left. And I even set up an alumni page on Facebook for all the King alumni. And I certainly, and I believe in the world is very small. You always meet twice, at least twice. And this is the reason why we set up Sweet Capital, was actually to help other entrepreneurs with our experience to succeed. That was 100% of the focus. And so
actually, the Minecraft guy came from you, no?
Yeah, Minecraft came from us. Yeah.
Ilkka,
do they ever leave? Are they starting new companies? Are you backing them?
Well, no, not that many people have left Supercell, but I mean, that hasn't stopped us from like backing like lots of people. I mean, I also have my personal family office and do investments through that vehicle, and we have been investing to lots of funds, but also like done like quite a bit of like direct investments myself. And I know many of my co-founders and actually many other people have joined Supercell later on and who are still at Supercell. They do angel investments, and we have a like thriving ecosystem here in Helsinki, but like I as a person, for example, have like done investments like across Europe and even in the US. So and I know that's what people like Riccardo and I kind of love to do. I mean, we both, I'm sure, like love either building new things or then at least helping other people who are trying to build new things, and of course can then hopefully help every once in a while like with our experience and yeah, I mean and it just comes like naturally like from people like us, and again it's one of those things like that their kind of success creates success, and the more successes we have coming from Europe, the stronger the ecosystem kind of becomes, and it all comes back to the ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, and then last question from me, and then we'll go to everyone else. But thinking of beyond the day job, you're both doing a lot beyond the day job, and Riccardo's even given up the day job, which is another longer story. But what do you find most fulfilling outside the day job? And I guess quickly, since you are both, well, Ilkka, you've already done it with Hive, brought a coding school to Helsinki. Riccardo is far advanced with that in Italy as well. So a little bit about the coding school, and then maybe about some of your other things that you find very rewarding outside of the core business. Do you want to go, Ilkka, while you want to go first?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as I said, I'm passionate about building new things and trying other people and teams to build new things, and it can be almost anything. But the kind of causes that I care about they actually are education. Hive is a new type of coding school. Which actually definitely wasn't invented by us. Xavier Neal out of Paris like pioneered that type of school called École 42 in Paris, and we merely like kind of basically copied his model, did some modifications, and launched that in Helsinki. And I've been involved in many like such initiatives, also like funded by Supercell. For example, we've funded hundreds of like new innovative schools that are called speed schools in Uganda and Ethiopia, and just have enjoyed being part of those type of things. And then as I said, I do like, even of course I don't use my full-time job still very much is being a CEO of Supercell, but I do have my own private family office which does investments, and I quite enjoy like just interacting with the founders and observing them from like and trying to help them on their path to build new great things. And the bigger and riskier the better, that is exciting for me. And then on top of that, my co-founder Mikko and we've set up a philanthropic trust or foundation here in Finland, where we're trying to kind of fight against the kind of social inequality problems through the power of games, and that's been exciting as well.
Great. Riccardo?
I'm mainly focused, I would say, besides some personal things, I'm mainly focused on two things. Number one, Sweet Capital, where so far we've done about 40 investments. It's only our money, so we don't have any external money. And we focus on things we understand, we think, which is mobile and consumer, not games for competitive reasons. And it's a lot of fun and very, very interesting. And the other thing I focus on is I set up a charitable foundation where we have a team of very, very experienced people focused on medical research into rare genetic diseases that cause cancer in kids. And that's where actually most of my resources in fact go. And it's very exciting, but incredible people. I have to say the medical industry is really very different if you have a look at it from the inside and from the outside. Really
We've actually got,
people.
well, one of our next talks is going to be with Anne Vajicki, the founder of 23andMe, and the CEO of Genomics England, with Martin Wazowski. So that should dive into some of those topics, hopefully.
Super interesting.
So quickly, the next question, I think, from Dominic Cameron.
Thanks. So sorry about the delay, guys. Thanks for your time. Quick question on payments in your world. Are you seeing any long-run changes in the balance between pay-to-play and in-game payments versus subscriptions? Or is the transactional model still dominant and the one that's going to stay? What might drive any change, the consumer side?
Ilkka, you want to take it?
Visibility perhaps the fact that in capital
on our side, like we are still very focused on this sort of free-to-play model, based on selling virtual goods and currency. That seems to work like the best for us. And within that framework where we're going to see the world going is that you're going to see more and more of these kind of seasonal passes, which Fortnite I think pioneered at a large scale in the games industry. But following their example, many games have done the same, and including ours. So you do pay say, for example, $10 for a season of say 10 weeks or something like that, and then you get bigger rewards and benefits if you do that, and just a better experience. But I would still say that it's almost like subscription, but it isn't, and I think it's actually a healthier model because the users need to they need to actively renew it after the season ends, for example every 10 weeks, so it doesn't automatically renew itself, which I think is a good thing. But other than that, we've been pretty focused on the kind of free-to-play model as such, and haven't been active on subscriptions or pay-to-play type of models.
Riccardo, are you seeing any changes?
Well, my advice rather, I think that it's never take something as the answer, the gold answer to everything. So you always need to use your judgment. But I can tell you my experience over the 17 years I ran King was that we've tried all the models, including subscription, by the way, is I think that free-to-play has enabled really to lower the barriers to play and the barriers to pay. And I would recommend you highly not to change that, at least for new users. Now, when you move into a situation where someone knows the product very well, you have VIP users, loyal players, then that's where you can actually add additional layers of complexity or layers of retention, like for example, subscription, etc., or packages. And that's where you can also actually give a lot of value for that. Associating a lot of value with this specific package, you can also increase retention, etc. But I would not recommend, at least for bringing in new players, to move away from a model where it's a free to play. That's my experience at least. But this said, you always need to use your judgment.
Thank you. I'm going to quickly paraphrase a question from LinkedIn from Ralph Simon. And he is asking, Ilkka, what was it like working with Masa-san? And I guess I'm going to add to that, are you long or short SoftBank now? And I'll add for Riccardo, Mark Pincus, long or short Zynga?
Well, first of all, it was fantastic to work with Masa. I feel that I was very lucky that I had an opportunity to work with him. He was the chairman of our board, and one of those people that you've learned so much from. And I guess I feel that I'm I've been just so lucky, like in terms of the kind of chairmen that I had in our board. So it started with Petteri Koponen, who was an amazing person, a coach, that I referred to early on. Then after him, Masa, and now we have Martin Lau from Tencent, and you just couldn't also ask for a better chairman than him. And felt that I've learned so much from all of those three people, and all just tremendous coaches with big visions. And
long or short?
So,
well, I would say that, you know, I just believe in Masa as he's going to be ultimate founder, an entrepreneur, leader, visionary. You know, he thinks very, very big. Is not afraid to take risks. So I'm just a big believer in him, and I guess if I believe in him, I also then it means that I believe in SoftBank as well.
Yep, great. Riccardo?
So Mark Pincus, I know him since a very long time, meaning he almost took me out of business twice. The first time he launched Farmville on Facebook back, I think it was 2009. And we lost 45% of our new traffic coming in. We lost Yahoo basically, which was our biggest partner. And in the space of a year, we were almost out of business. And that's where we had to reinvent ourselves. And the second time where I experienced him again was when we actually did succeed on Facebook, and we had a very successful game called Jungle Bubble, where he actually copied our game and then took us almost out of business because he had 90% market share at the time, and we were growing very fast, but you know, he was 90 times bigger than we were, or no, sorry, 9 times bigger than we were, at least. And so these were two experiences. I think going through this, there are a few pros and a few cons. I think one thing that I think he's done amazing, he is the embodiment of someone who doesn't give up. Yeah. So, and I think that's a key characteristic in an entrepreneur. I think on the other side, I think that at the time, at least, he was very much pushing for a culture of don't think that you know better than the market. If something works, you copy it, and then you launch it, and you launch it fast. And this works only for a period of time. But when you have someone innovative, like we innovated twice, at least with the launch of the game and bringing it to mobile, then it was impossible for him to catch up. And the reason why basically Zynga lost a lot of market share was actually because of the reason that we launched Candy Crush. So basically we took Zynga, the carpet under their feet like they did before with us. Mm-hmm. So I cannot answer the question long or short from this perspective, but I have to say that he's done an incredible job in bringing Zynga out of where it was before to where it is now, basically re-energizing it. And so I have a high estimate for this. And he's done also an incredible job in investing in companies. So I think he's a great entrepreneur.
Brilliant. Do we have Massimo Ridelli on to ask a question?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Riccardo, and thank you, Ilkka, for sharing your wonderful personal and professional experience. I have a question for both of you. Riccardo, you mentioned that digital brought us together closer one-on-one. Ilkka, you mentioned that COVID somehow forced us to go all digital. My question is related to my background, my experience, which is more physical experience. Riccardo, you remember how wonderful the experience in Rome represent, and Brent remember it too, the amazing cultural experience. Ilkka, you probably also remember in January, we were skiing in a great group of people in St. Moritz, and how wonderful that physical experience represented for that community that Lake Star created. So the question is, could we foresee in the near future your industry somehow to create an emotional chemistry relationship that somehow come humanly closer to what we can experience in a physical, emotional terms?
We did. We invest in a company called Electronic Theater, where you can actually play games in a physical room with others. So, but this is outside of King. This is as part of Sweet Capital. So yes, definitely. I mean, if you think of games played in a family at the table, are super fun games. That's where it starts. But I think that what digital gives you is scalability, and that's very difficult to make it physically.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you know, if you look at the most successful games right now, like look at Fortnite, look at Roblox, Minecraft, and a few other like these like very social games. I mean, that's essentially what they've also done. And you know, look at the teenagers of today. Like instead of like going out and say hanging out with their friends in a mall, maybe they hang out in Fortnite. and for them that's maybe even a better experience. The game gives them a kind of a place to meet, a social place to hang out, and also maybe some context to like what to talk about. And while I still believe that it is important, of course, to meet people physically, and I don't think online, and I don't want online to like completely replace it, but I think the kind of relationships that you can form through games can be extremely significant, for all kinds of people. And we see it the same in our games. Like one of our most popular games is a farming game called Heyday. There, we have elderly people who like form neighborhoods where they play together, and those can end up being very socially very meaningful relationships that last on for years and years. And then eventually these people might actually also meet in the physical world.
Thank you everyone for participating, and thank you especially to Ilkka and Riccardo. It's always fantastic to have you together, even more so to have you on, but even more special when you are on together. So really appreciate all that you guys do for the tech industry and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. It's always a great pleasure to be there here with you. See you soon.
Thank you, Riccardo. Thank you, Brent. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.